plan for the week. We have exam next Tuesday in the afternoon. So today, so what's that? That's a week from now, 168 hours. So we'll have we'll have a look at the first test we did today. So I'll hand back your tests in a moment. For the first test and the second test, we can have a look. We can take photos of them. With the tricks test, I finished marking them. Your results are up. We will have a look at it, but you're not allowed to take photos of it. And I will go through some answers, but I do ask you not to take photos of it or share anything with the other class. Okay, let's concentrate here. So today we're going to talk about functions and relations. With that test, that was chapter 1 and 3. Okay, that's where we're doing things like equations of lines. That's what we started the year with. We had that booklet on equations of lines. And then in chapter 1, we're looking at linear relationships, inverse relationships. In chapter 3, we've got things like what's the difference between a function and a relation. We've got sign diagrams, we've got domain and range, we have function notation. So we have all those kinds of things in the first test. And then in the second test, we had polynomials, which was about predominantly quadratics, and then with a little bit of cubics and quartics thrown in there. So today, what I'm going to ask you to do, pull your textbook out. We're going to scroll through it together. Now, we've kept notes. We didn't have a notes booklet for this chapter, but we did take your own notes. So you should have them recorded down. You should have the examples and the guide on how to do it. But I am just going to flip through the textbook. So we started with linear relationships, and so that's the equation of a line. And we started with the year 10 skills around that. We started with find the slope of this line, find the y-intercept, find the equation of the line, graph it, etc. And then we pulled out the textbook and we said, let's look at some practical applications of it. And so that's where we're using a line to model some relationship. Here we pointed out the difference between direct proportion and indirect proportion. So remember that specifically, direct proportion has to go through the point of origin. And so yeah, we're just looking at some questions around the equation of a line y equals mx plus c. Okay, it should be a skill we know pretty well backwards by now. Okay, so that was 1A, and then we are on to 1B where we talked about inverse proportion. So the example that I gave you guys when we were doing inverse proportion was about the people mowing the lawn. Remember when they're mowing the lawn, and the more people you have mowing the lawn, the quicker it's going to get done. And so inverse proportion has the equation, let's just say we have this table of values. Just remembering from the example, 61, 32, 15, 23, 15, 4. Okay, inverse proportion is y equals k on x. And so if you rearrange that, we've got k equals x times y. And so you notice that this is in inverse proportion because the product of x and y is always 60. 2 times 30 is 60, 3 times 20 is 60, 4 times 15 is 60. So the context of that was, if we have one person mowing the lawn, it takes 60 minutes. 2 people, 30 minutes. 3 people, 20 minutes. And so it's inversely proportional. The more people you have mowing the lawn, the quicker it's going to get done. So that was in 1B. In 1C and D, we were really looking at the graphs of inverse relationships. And we're using our calculator a fair bit there. I'm not going to dwell too long on there. I'm going to jump to chapter 3. Encourage you to use your calculator for 1C and D. So chapter 3, in 3A, we learnt the difference between functions and relations. And so you have a look at this example here. We just performed a vertical line test, don't we? We say you pass a vertical line across it, and if it only crosses it once, okay, so like this one here, you see, no matter where you throw the vertical line, it's only crossing it once, therefore it's a function, okay? But in the second example, you've got this kind of shape here, it's crossing it twice, crossing the curve twice, therefore it's a relation, okay? So function is a specific case where each x value only has one y value, whereas in a relation, each x value can have multiple y values, okay? Moving on. So that was in 1A. In B, 3A, sorry. What's 3B? 3B is where we introduce you to function notation. So for instance, that's where if we have f of x is x squared, find f of 1. Okay, that's where you put the number 1 where the x is and evaluate it. In 3C, I might just talk very quickly about domain and range as well, remind you of something else. That was, if we have a reciprocal function, like let's come up with one, x take 3 on x plus 5, okay? So a function like this, it's a fraction, isn't it? So let's say your f of x is this function. Now this is going to equal 0, it's going to have its roots are going to occur when the numerator is 0, okay? So root, or x-intercept, root is 0, so they mean the same thing. X-intercept is 3. And then when the denominator is 0, we're going to have an asymptote. It's undefined when the denominator is 0. Undefined when x is minus 5. Because then you're dividing by 0. Okay, so that was also done in there. Then we did domain and range. Okay, so you may need to revise those skills a bit. If you're looking back to when we first taught it, I said, this is the best way to think about it. What's the point for domain is x. What's the point furthest to the left? What's the point furthest to the right? And you're always writing it like this, aren't you? The leftmost point, less than x, less than the rightmost point. We're using this or this one, considering if the point is coloured in or not, if it's a... okay, so that's an example of where we say it includes the point, and that's an example of where we don't include the point. It goes right up to it, but it doesn't include it. And within that, we talked about how we can simplify it. Like if it's got an arrow going on forever, so let's do an example. Let's say we've got like this one. Okay, and that's an asymptote. Let's say this has an x value of 5. This has a coordinate of 2 and 3. And this is the line below 1. Okay, so if we had to find the domain and range of this function, so if we're thinking of domain, right, we're saying what is the point furthest to the left? Okay, so you can see this arrow here, it's going to the left forever. So the furthermost point is minus infinity. We're going to say x, because we're talking about domain, and then we're saying which point is furthest to the right? Point furthest across. It's not this one here, it's going to be this value here. That's the furthest point to the right. So we have this statement about the domain, minus infinity is less than x is less than 5. And I've said we drop infinity, so we're going to have x is less than or equal to 5. And if we need to, we always write the variable first. So that might be, for instance, we have this statement, 5 is less than or equal to x. We always write the variable first, and we do that by rotating that around. Okay, so we flip the inequality and swap the numbers. Okay, that would simplify that. We're talking about the range of this one. The lowest value of y is 1. Okay? And it gets infinitely close to 1, but it never touches 1 because there's an asymptote there. So the lowest value of y is 1, but we're not including it. And then the highest value of y is 3, and we are including it. Okay, not including it, and we are including 3. So here's the domain, here's the range. That might be, so if that's a skill we need to spend a bit of time on, we can do that. There's some good examples in there. So that was 3C. In 3D, we're talking about sign diagrams. Now, when we were doing sign diagrams, 3D is composite functions. 3D is composite functions. So that's where if we have f of x is x squared, and g of x is 2x plus 1, and we need to find f of g of x, you're putting that whole function into f of x. So that's composite functions. That was in D. Then in E, 3E, we're on to sign diagrams. And we looked at both. We looked at, we had questions where we started with a graph and we had to draw the sign diagram. We're just indicating when's it above, when's it below the x-axis. So let's do a quick example. You know, here's a cubic with -5, -1, and 3. And its sign diagram is just going to have those points on it, isn't it? -1 and 3. And you're just saying, when is it above, when is it below? We're above, we're below, we're above, and then we're below again. We indicate asymptotes on a sign diagram with a dotted line. If there's an asymptote, there's not in that question. So we did it from that, and then we did it from an equation as well, where I said you need to make a mathematical argument. Okay, in the exam there won't be that, it'll be just you can sketch that on your calculator, G-solve the roots, and then draw the sine diagram from the graph. Okay, in F we talk about translation. So there were 3 parts of F, and we've sort of perfected this skill, I think, here. We did it in our folio task, and then we've done it just recently with trigonometric functions. Okay, a sine b of x takes c plus d. We're pretty familiar with how those values affect the function. So that was all 3F1 and 2 and 3. And then we're on to circles. So in 3G we did circles, and circles are probably pretty fresh as well because we touched on them in the assignment. The equation of a circle is x take a squared plus y take b squared is r squared, where the centre of the circle is AB and the radius is R. R is the radius. Alright, so we did both. We had to sketch a circle from this information, and then we had to find the equation of a circle from a circle on the Cartesian plane. So that might be an error. So that's what we've been over. Okay, that's what we did right at the start of the year. It's a long time ago, but hopefully that sort of brief overview sort of gets the mind ticking along with it. I've got a revision sheet specifically for functions and relations for us to work on today. Tomorrow I've got a revision sheet specifically for polynomials, and then I do have a practice exam as well. I have pressed print, but I don't know why it's not popping out the printer. I'll see if I can solve that issue now so I can give both to you today. So what I'm going to give you, I'm giving you a sheet for this, and an exam. Okay, you can look at any of our practice tests. You can look at your old tests that you've done. You can use review sets. It's up to you how you spend your time today. My recommendation would be the sheet that I'm about to provide you. As far as the cheat sheet situation goes, you're allowed 2 pages of handwritten notes, single-sided. Okay, unit circle will provide, or you can bring your own again. Yeah. Any questions? All right, so I'll hand out this sheet. You guys can get into it.